Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this LinkedIn Live. Topic is managing project sales negotiations. Well, you may be asking yourself, but what is this specifically? Well, we will discover some more with the guest of today, Regina Roos, and we will ask her to introduce herself in a moment. I know Regina from over 20 years, but before we want to know a bit more about our audience. And by the way, this is your LinkedIn Live, so be prepared, to ask questions to make sure that you get the most from this event. Now, first of all, how about telling us from where you're connecting so that we have an idea of where we are connecting? And we know that I know that Regina's worked all over the world, so we may have some of the previous business partner of Regina that are connecting from Australia, from Singapore, or somewhere else. And now we are both based in Switzerland. So let's see where is our audience joining us from. So use the chat that you find on the right side. Wow, we already have Anen from Tunisia, extremely bright executive MBA student. Really a pleasure to work with her. Alison, another executive MBA, but from Switzerland. And let's get from a few more people and here so that we see we have already 2 person, 2 continents. And here's the third continent. We have Subeti from Singapore. We have someone from India as well. Then we have Rafael, Professor Rafael Cohen from Geneva. Thank you for being there, Rafael. And let's see who else is with us today. And as you're getting ready and comfortable for this session, how about if we get Regina to tell us a bit more about herself? Regina, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, for the short introduction. Who is on the call? My name is Regina Roos, and my name was always Regina Roos. So I'm having a daughter who is called Patricia, and I'm living in a relationship. I never changed my name. From a business point, I studied electrical engineering. That was a long time ago, but I kept that always as my path in my career because I worked for ABB in project management. I then took over sales responsibility for ABB. I was asked to run the Asia Pacific region. I managed key account management there, which was a really rewarding part because I learned that there's a difference between a one-off sales and developing a customer journey. The next part, which I did in my career, was moving to Asia and building up business units in places like Malaysia, India, China, and also a little excursion into Russia. Staying in Australia for 8 years was a very important part of my life experience and work experience because here I got familiar with selling projects. I spent time in the last 5 years with Schneider Electric, which also taught me a lot about how to handle projects in Asia. And recently, I decided to be part of startup organizations. I developed concepts for streaming. I worked in digital health setups, which is a unique area. I don't want to touch too much today on it. And I'm now involved in Typhoon Hill, developing a market coverage for digital twins. What does it mean? That means you can't test everything in reality. It gets too costly and you cannot catch every, possible case. So use the digital concepts and simulate reality if it is in automobile sector or in mining or in other fields like power plants. Presently living in Switzerland in the canton of Aarau, and here I'm, put it that way, a place of choice from where I can travel very nicely into the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Regina. Just for the small story, Regina and I met over 20 years ago. She was in charge of sales at ABB. I was working with Procter and Gamble, and we established, already in the previous century. Yes, we can talk about indeed the 20th century. We established a global agreement across business unit on a transformer, a low density board, so that's a low voltage boards. So that was quite an achievement for the time. It was quite unusual, and I appreciated very much working with Regina at the time. And that's we continue to stay connected, even if we both changed our employer and developed different career paths. And so, Regina, since you worked a lot on partnership projects and frame agreement, an area where you developed, a great expertise. So today you are sharing with us knowledge and guide us on selling major projects. So for our audience, it's important, what is the difference, between a major project and a commodity sales in your eyes?
Well, commodity sales is something where you have an item or something which you can measure, which you sell one-off. And we have that in a lot of fields. We have that in the retail business when I buy some clothes or when I buy shoes. We have it in the industry sector when I, for example, think about selling steel or selling pipes. Then you sell this item one-off to somebody to use. And this is not, I say, continuously the same item which you are selling. When you then think about major project sales, then you have an element of commodity sales included, because imagine you are selling the entire electrification for a power station. Within the power station, you have electrical items like a transformer, you have a switch room, you have machines, motors, or even measuring instruments and sensors which help you to identify what the temperature is, or you have conveyor belts so that equipment can move along. So in a major project sales, you put a lot of different items together and make them working and functioning together. And not only at the moment when you sell it, but through the entire life cycle, which I call a selling from cradle to grave. That means when you engineer the project till the time that the project is serviced, is in operation, and maybe with the last element, which is now getting more and more important, the waste management, when after 20 or 30 years, you have to dismantle and recycle all the equipment.
Wow. So we are really taking a long-term perspective on negotiating in long-term kind of agreement. I mean, out of all those projects that you negotiated in your career, which project was most remarkable for you during the negotiation phase? So that we get into the negotiation right topic of today.
Giuseppe, you asked me an interesting question, and you want to have one answer. But it's Regina, so I have to give you two answers, one for the left hand and one for the right hand. So one of my projects, which I will never forget, is the Worsley Alumina project. The Worsley Alumina project was in Australia. And the real challenge in that project was we were too late entering this project. So when we entered this project, it was already in the time when the tenders had been written, the specification had been written, and something was sent to ABB, and we should bid. And when I got these papers in my hands, all the different type of products, I said, we cannot quote for that because it doesn't fit our products. The specification has too many deviations to declare. And what that means, we are not in a field of competitiveness with the others. So it's not worth the time. Then the business partner Bechtel was saying, well, but we need a quotation. So I said, no, I'm not quoting for that. I went back into the internal organization and said, what shall we do? And they said, well, if we have no chance to win, we will not quote, which I fully agreed. So then, similar, like when I did my partnership agreement with Giuseppe on Procter & Gamble, I said, look, let's sit on a table and work out internally what options we have. And we said the only way how we can make, an impact, we asked the client if he is willing to run a workshop with us so that we can explain to him how our solution looks like, and that we will quote with clear borderlines of what is included and what is excluded, but we will not refer back to the specification. And then he can decide if he's willing to work with his team or not. The customer decided to work with us based on that concept. So we did a 2 days workshop where we explained how ABB is managing bigger projects. We presented our type of people working in these projects. We shared how we build up what we call a full electrification package. We explained how we ensure that the interfaces are working internally, but also with third-party companies. And finally, we put it out our bid, we put a price out, and yes, we won this bid. And then there was a crisis in the project because our delivery time was not met. That was a high point. The project director called us in. I was with a country manager from ABB Australia in a meeting. And this man said to me, Regina, you have only one chance to make a first impression. So watch out what you say. And that was a tough moment because I got told from the project manager what the problem is. One part of our equipment was light. The other one didn't, fit in the room. The size didn't really fit. And there was no coordination with parties which were not in our scope of supply. For example, the installation company, plus the fact that nobody looked into it. It was in Australia that there might be raining seasons like we have it at the moment. When you have a raining season, you can't move with the trucks through certain areas. Delays can come up. And that was, a major issue because project delay, which means consequently delay of start of production. So I said, yes, I take up the second challenge. I need internally to find a solution. So I went back to our team and we discussed all the problems which occurred. We came back to the project director with a clear plan where we identified the issues which had been addressed to us, where we put it up a possible path to move. And the last sentence of the project director was, Regina, and now we need a Swiss clock. I responded, and everybody was in that moment shocked because they thought Regina had done some bribery. What is a Swiss clock meaning? For me, it was very clear. The project manager's message was, give me the best project manager you have, because what you just said needs to be implemented, and there is no chance to fail. He got this project manager, and a project manager is like a product. He has to qualify according to certain criteria, what the project really requires. 6 months later, I went to the customer side. The project director said to me, well done, Regina. We are back on schedule. And the most important thing the project director of ABB did was not only following the plan, but looking to all the interfaces and building up a good communication. So my learning out of it was, it's not about selling the most beautiful motor. It's looking to the entire team, which you need to make success. And that includes people.
Absolutely.
And the second project, also in Asia, I keep it very short because I don't want to run out of time, because I'm sure you have some other questions, and I believe also all these participants already built up some ideas for me, was a project in Singapore. It was a power station project called TUAS. an incineration plant, or other people call it waste to energy plant. Here, also a combination of electrical equipment, automation equipment, a negotiation partner in Japan, and from ABB and external partners, we had equipment from all over the world. And here, the biggest challenge was to coordinate people and their expectations. Because even in big organizations, you have internally a lot of conflicts to manage, because not everybody has the same understanding of commercial conditions, of expectations on risk management, on safety management. And then negotiating that with a Japanese partner is not the same compared to doing it on a European platform, because the Japanese people are very precise. They go line by line through the contract and ensure upfront that you have the borderlines correct. So when later on claims come up, you know exactly where you stand. I liked the concept, but it was time intensive in the negotiation phase. However, the execution of the project was much smoother than the Worsley Alumina project.
Okay, by the way, the fact that you mentioned those differences in this cultural difference gave me the opportunity to inform the participants that on Friday I have a webinar. I have a webinar about cross-cultural negotiations. So on Friday at 2 o'clock Central European time, you will have the opportunity, if you're interested, to join a webinar on cross-cultural negotiation and discover a bit more on this fascinating topic. What we're going to do, we're going to put the link on the chat, and if you're interested and available, then you can sign up for this webinar. Let me also take the opportunity, since if you're joining this project, if you're joining this LinkedIn Live, you're probably joining interested in negotiation. So let me talk to you about our next LinkedIn Live project, which will take place on the 17th of March. Challenges in negotiating long-term contracts, a case for oil and gas industry. So again, another challenging type of context, very much long-term relationship like the one that Regina was describing today. And we will be looking at this kind of situation in oil and gas with Filippo Rigoni. So don't miss this opportunity. And we're going to put in the chat also the next LinkedIn Live so that you can also sign up. Maybe one more thing and then we continue, Regina. If you're interested in negotiation, how about downloading our free negotiation pack? We have a negotiation pack with a template on how to prepare a negotiation. We have articles, we have videos and those kind of things. So let's also see if you want to get some more insight, then join and sign up for our free negotiation pack. Okay, back to Regina, sorry, but you talked to us about, the importance of working effectively with your counterpart, with your internal team. And but when negotiating a major project, the kind of project that you're talking, in preparing the relevant commercial and technical requirements, what are the key pointers in your thought process?
Giuseppe, this is a topic which I could fill a whole hour or maybe a classroom with. So let's see if we can compress it to three major areas. One is, whenever you engage in a major project, my recommendation is start early being part of that project and not when the tendering phase starts. And this means you really understand, I would call it, when I take it from an MBA point, because we have a couple of MBA people here on the call, follow the PESTEL principle. understand the political aspects, the environmental aspects, the social aspects, the economical ones, and the technical ones, which leads to the fact that you are looking very carefully what you will offer in the solution. Staying on the electrical and automation part of it, it means make sure that whatever you bring into that location, you can engage some local people later on into the maintenance and service work so that the local people get some work there. Staying on the Worsley Alumina project, which is in a very remote area of Australia, in Western Australia, which means that the community there can later on do some maintenance work on the project, on the equipment. They can do annual, I say, inspections, which also will be really accepted by the government there and maybe helps you to get a preference. The other part of it is understand that you be familiar with the local health and safety rules. Because when you're delivering equipment and doing installation, you need to ensure that you have no accidents at site. And zero tolerance is not only a concept which ABB applied, also the customers applied. And of course, it is, I would call, a personal obligation. And that's sometimes not very easy when considering that you have really rough and tough conditions where you work. Look, if I'm sitting in Mannheim in Germany and have to travel to Switzerland, I have great simple roads. I have no major weather conditions, all very easy. If I'm in Australia and have to bring the equipment from Perth, 1,000 kilometers north on roads which are not easy accessible on the last part, where maybe the typical raining season impacts, and that means you cannot travel 12 months a year continuously. You may have some breaks because the typhoon season starts. So that's what you have to consider in that field, also when you build up your risk plan. The second part in it is selecting the people. And when I think about, or when I talk about major projects, I'm not only talking about a conglomerate of different products put together. It also includes engineering. It includes site services. And that's not all within the same company taken from. It's working with sub-suppliers, and that means good interface communication needs to be set up, understanding the other parties' technical understanding, technical competence. So you need to do assessments of your sub-supplier. And that means at the same time, if you are acting as a seller, you also be a buyer within the main project. And you're representing your sub-suppliers against the end customer. That means at the same time, the commercial conditions need to be very clearly discussed, not only with the end client, but also with a sub-supplier. Not that the sub-supplier at the end is accountable for topics which he cannot, due to the size of the company, manage, or which he has not even covered in an insurance, which is also not fair, because maybe some smaller companies can get into bankruptcy just because of engaging in projects which they are not capable for. So that's definitively a point of managing the risk in full.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I should go into that element. When it comes to the technical scoping, I always say be extremely clear what is included and what is not included. Not what's the deviation to the specification, but make your boundaries clear. Because later on, maybe somebody says, yeah, but I assumed, and I assuming is not allowed when you do contract negotiations. It's all black and white. And therefore, be very clear and put it in writing. And also, don't take side talks, which then are assumed as part of the project. You can, I say, have a lot of discussions up front, but in the final papers, make it, as I use the word, crystal clear. And there's no difference between languages, nationalities, or cultures. It's just basic facts, clear worded.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, of course, in those long-term relationships, then people may change. They're not going to be the same over time, and therefore it's important that whatever has been agreed, is clearly spelled out. And another message that I take, from your discussion is that, there is a lots of interaction and discussion and understanding and being there on site to see what is happening, what should happen. I mean, what changes to the sales process did you experience during the pandemic period, during the COVID period, right? Any changes in the relationship building, any changes in sites visit? I mean, how did you manage in the last 2 years?
Giuseppe, I wish that I can go out again and be with the people in person. When dealing on projects where you know the people from the past, it was still possible during the pandemic to continue on project negotiations in a very constructive and good way. However, as we all know, with the pandemic, we had to learn to work in virtual teams. Which is an internal learning, and we had to negotiate with the customers just over the screen. And if you think about the fact when you are sitting in a room, you are getting a complete different feeling about all the people on the negotiation table. And you have all of them on one, platform, the buyer, maybe the risk manager, maybe the, health and safety manager, the project director, and the technical players. And that on both sides. And this is like an orchestra which you manage. If you have it only on the screen, then there's a lot missing. There's a personal, empathy missing, which you bring by face contact, or even if a person is standing up and he's moving around a lot. And then you can also from that, nervous elements recognize something is not going right. In the pandemic time, negotiations are not the same as before, but we had to manage them. Projects still got closed and we moved on. However, and now it comes the hard part, working with new clients is extremely difficult. And that's for various reasons, because meeting people, building up relationships, and eventually also sharing a good cup of coffee, sharing a beer, or learning a little bit about the person's history. What type of profile manager was he? Or what is a customer's expectation in respect of executing the project? Getting it across over the screen is very different. So the other part which in the pandemic came up, your pricing structure changed completely. Imagine people couldn't work in the factory anymore on the same time schedule. Suddenly we had to put in the calculations 2 shifts for the same product. Then you had to put in, how do you do factory acceptance tests? You had to do it virtually. Okay, you can say virtual concepts bring a cost savings because people don't have to fly anymore and we do something for the sustainability. Correct. But it is a big learning process because people have to build up trust by using the digital tools to achieve the same results, but with a new media.
Wow.
However, there's one thing which you cannot completely replace with digital, even if you have drones who, can do good site surveillance, site visits. Often, when you start a project, you also like to do a site observation, especially when it's a brownfield project. Brownfield projects are, for people who don't know what I mean, it is a project where the site already exists and you just make an expansion. For example, you build a new generator up, or you put a new production line up in a paper plant, then you visit the site and get a feeling of what's already installed and see which interfaces you can use. During the pandemic, it wasn't possible to do that site visits. You had to use other means. And working in a virtual environment using with the video cameras, it was always a wish that this happens. Now we had been forced to do it. It's getting better. However, there's still, I would call it, the old man with a ponytail who says, I still like to do it my old way. Let me go to site, touch the equipment, talk to the people who use the equipment for 20 years and who can give me the real hint what could be a big problem coming up here in that field.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Regina. So yes, hopefully we are at the end of this period. I mean, I say hopefully because we never know when it's over, but then we can go back to the more traditional way and take the learning, the kind of things that we learned, from during pandemic times, to improve the processes. Let's take a question from the audience. We have one from Ron Lu. When engaging on project, is scope creep an issue? And if yes, how do you deal with that?
It will always be a topic which can come up because there are changes and changes needs to be managed. And in the moment when you pick it up, you should not delay it and wait. When the project is over, then we do a big wash up and make the necessary commercial adjustments. Address the issue at the time when it comes up, bring the right people on the table, and make a commercial adjustment and a technical adjustment wherever required. And sometimes even ask first deeply, why do you want to do it? What is your driver for that change? Often people only have a wish because they have seen something on the internet or they have done some theoretical studies. Sometimes it can help to talk to an experienced person or say, let's make a reference and talk to a plant site who has already gone through that issue. Ron, if I haven't handled your question well, then please put your comments in the chat.
Okay, Regina, let me build on this question from Ron. I mean, what is your approach when negotiating change request? I mean, did you develop some rule of thumb that can be useful for our audience about how do you negotiate a change request?
Changes will happen in every project. The best thing is already when you put your offering together and when you submit your bid, you put a so-called change table to it. A change table which relates to change in man hours, change in equipment supply, and you put then so-called unit prices on. Make it on the sample of you're buying a package of electrical equipment, which is called an electrical container. And the electrical container includes a certain amount of motors, drives, and switchgear. And if that is changing, you have then a list of items, what is a change. However, the change price is not always the same. The price is defined. Is a change coming at the engineering stage? Then you can easily buy more material from your sub-suppliers on the same rate as the other material. If the change is coming at the time of during production, then the change price will be different. If the change is only happening after delivery to site happened, also a new pricing concept will be there. So you put down a table which also gives you gate points at which time the change is happening and what impact it has eventually to the interfaces.
Yeah. Perfect. Time is flying. I mean, let me ask you one last question, but it finishes on a topic that I know is close to your heart. You know, the human side. I mean, you speak about the fact that project sales is a teamwork activity. Can you please elaborate on this?
It's like a soccer team, I would say. It's not like playing golf. There are some activities which you do, they're like golf. You're only performing on yourself and you're not dependent on others. In a project sales, you have the so called project pursuit leader. The project pursuit leader needs people who help him to write the tenders. He needs people who understand the technical requirements, the health and safety. There are people who deal with sub-suppliers. So everybody has a role, but there's also interfaces connected to each other. And you have to make sure that all of them understand each other with a good communication, which includes not only the technical aspects, but also the safety and what is the sustainability we want to have nowadays. Because Nachhaltigkeit, or in English, sustainability, is a wish. So that means we should offer solutions which fit into the environment of the next 20 years. And it's not only that I have one product which works, it has to be connected to the other, which has similar criteria or characteristics in that field. Also, when it comes to the commercial conditions, people have to talk that they accept similar rules internally. And if you look to big companies, we are working often in business units, and each business unit might has different expectations on when it comes to a delivery time. But if the delivery time of their scope doesn't fit the rest, then the interface is not well harmonized. So it is all about making sure that the entire big picture fits, but that's only on one side. Then you also have to look to your customer side. There's also additional parties which come into the game, because there is partners with whom you have to interface as well again. And then you're putting basically two teams together who make even a bigger team and need to interact on that part. And that means even the overall project schedule has to match and make things happening.
Yeah.
And that's in the at the time of the pandemic, it was a lot more difficult, because one thing which people didn't know well in the beginning, when you were in one office, you maybe went to your colleague and had a short chat and discussed the issues. In the beginning, you were frightened maybe to go on the phone and say, hey, I need your help. We need to go through the documents together. You suddenly started to ask for a formal meeting. But it would have been good enough just to work in a normal way by talking to each other. So working under the pandemic conditions required a new culture in interactions in a virtual world in that field.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Regina. I guess, my key takeaway, when we talk about managing project sales and negotiation, the human side, this is the one thing that probably stands the most from your message, how you have to get the people to work well together. On your side, the whole team, on the other side, then the integration of the two. It's not about, the lowest price. It's not about, tough. Of course, there are also negotiation on pricing, on terms, etc. But in order to win, in order to be successful, in order to deliver on your promise, then how you work inside the company, you build the team, and how you make sure that you have the right people to continue to deliver over time seems to be, the key message from this chat today. So thank you very much, Regina. Let me remind you, by the way, if you want to continue the learning journey, that we have a webinar this Friday, 4th of March at 2 o'clock, cross-cultural negotiations. Then So you will find the link on the chat if you're interested to join us on cross-cultural negotiation. Then second thing, we have also a LinkedIn Live on the 17th of March at 2 o'clock, and challenges in negotiating long-term contracts. So very much a good continuation of this session with Regina, where we continue to reflect in a different environment about the kind of negotiating in a different environment than the traditional, commodity sales. And you'll also find the link on the chat for our negotiation pack, that where you may get templates, articles, and video to continue your learning journey into negotiation to become an even better negotiation. And look forward to connect with you again for future events. Regina, thank you very much again. Thank you to the audience for being with us, and all the very best for the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.